Hello, welcome to this lesson. It's called Fractional Exponents and Nth Roots, and it sounds really complicated, but actually it's really fun because for the last, 20 lessons, we've talked about square roots, and we've done so many kinds of problems with square roots. Now we're going to open your mind up to something beyond square roots and introduce some kind of neat things. I think once you get the hang of it, you'll understand. Let me just jump right into it. It's easier to show you than to tell you. So let's take square root of 2, for instance. Now you all know that the way to do square roots is to try to find out what multiplies by what to give you 2. So 2 times 1, for instance, but we can't find any pairs. We're always looking for pairs, right? So there's really no pairs here, so square root of 2 is actually as simple as you can get it. Now let me show you something. The name of this lesson is called Fractional Exponents. It turns out that anything with a radical can be written as an exponent that's a fraction. In other words, you've all learned about exponents up to this point, right? So let's say, you have, 3 squared. We've talked about that. We've talked about x squared, right? We've talked about y to the 4th power. We've talked about a to the 3rd power. We've talked about 7, even to the negative 2 power. We've talked about all of these exponents, but in every one of these cases, the exponents were whole numbers. I mean, they might be negative. We talked about that. They might be positive. We've even talked about 0. But we've never talked about what would it look like if we had something like x to the 1/2 power. Or x to the 1/3 power. So that's what I'm talking about. We want to learn about what is a fractional exponent. What does this mean? Well, I'm going to give you the punchline. When you have something like the square root of 2, that is exactly mathematically equivalent to 2 to the 1/2 power. All right? When you have a square root, notice that we're always looking for pairs, right? We're always looking for pairs of numbers to simplify the square root. That's why the exponent has a 2 in the bottom. So if you see anything raised to the 1/2 power, like x to the 1/2, like I had it here, or a to the 1/2, or 2 to the 1/2, all it means is the square root of 2, just like I've written it here. This symbol for the square root is exactly mathematically equivalent to this exponent here. So it doesn't matter how you write it, it's just literally like, German and French. I mean, this is one way to write it, this is another way to write it, but it's exactly the same thing. So let's do a few more, just to kind of get the hang of this. What if I told you 4 to the 1/2 power? Anything to the 1/2 power means what? It means the square root of that number. The 1/2 means square root. And again, I want to show you that the way we simplify it usually is we say 2 times 2, try to figure out something that multiplies, and we look for pairs of numbers. I always told you that, right? So you know from our previous work that this is just going to equal the number 2. I'm kind of opening your mind a little bit to show you that we were looking for pairs of numbers because this was a 1/2 exponent, a square root. In other words, we were looking for it because we're looking for something times itself to give us that number, but also it shows up in the bottom number of this exponent. We're looking for pairs because of the number 2 here. Let's keep on going. You'll see the pattern as we go here. What if I have 16 to the 1/2 power? How do I write that? Well, that's exactly the same thing as the square root of 16. If you see anything to the 1/2 power, it's just the square root of that thing. And we have learned over time that 4 times 4 is 16, and we're always looking for pairs of numbers, so the answer to this is actually 4. Just like the answer to that was 2, and so on. We're going to do one more, even though you probably see the point here. What if we have 9 to the 1/2? What does that mean? Well, it means the square root of 9.